And John Shadegg of Arizona. Congressman Shadegg, your fellow members, Neugebauer and his baby killer line thrown out there. Joe Wilson and his line, you lie. I'll admit, Eric Cantor got a shot at his headquarters the other day. This zeitgeist out there, this atmosphere of throwing bricks through windows, this sort of scary stuff that's going on. And the weekend's coming, and booze is now going to be added to it Friday and Saturday night. I know what happens in this country. If you're going into a weekend with craziness in the air, it ain't going to settle down at Friday night at 9. Your thoughts?
I actually think it is going to settle down Friday night at 9. I think it's going to settle down the minute Congress leaves town. I think the reality is that this goes on in politics, Chris. My first job in politics was working for the governor of Arizona, taking phone calls, and I always got the phone calls from the crazies. The answer is we need to move away from this kind of rhetoric. This was a huge piece of legislation. It was intensely debated for almost a year. Intemperate comments were made on both sides, and it's not surprising that perhaps more were made on the minority because the minority felt very shut out, and I can make the case that they were shut out. There's no excuse for this, but as a prosecutor, I don't think you're going to see this go on. I don't think you're going to see it escalate. I think people have had their moment. I think that, quite frankly, there's the focus on the press on it, and everybody's saying this is a bad idea, and people, quite frankly, being disgusted at anybody who isn't saying that this is unacceptable, I think is going to cause this to dissipate. The American people are interested in getting on with their lives, and I think they're going to get on with their lives.
What about your colleagues waving the Gadsden flag, the "Don't Tread on Me" flag of the Republic back in the early days of our country, over the side of the House wall there at the protesters, waving the flag and then apparently doing the cut your throat line, mentioning Nancy Pelosi? What do you make of that kind of behavior by your elected colleagues?
Well, the flag
I'm looking at it now.
Okay, the flag they flew, I understand, was the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. Is that the flag you're talking about?
The Gadsden flag from South Carolina, yeah, from the early days of our country, sure. I love that flag, but it's used to our enemies overseas, and we used it to London people that running our country when we were fought for our independence. It was never used against our own country before. That's the difference, Congressman.
Oh, I agree. I don't think anybody was advocating that it be used against our own country. I think what they were talking about is that there was a sentiment in the crowd, and if you were here, there were 250, 350, maybe 5,000 people, I don't know, 1,000 people outside that side of the Capitol, off what's called the beach, and members were standing out there. I don't think they were trying to incite the crowd. I think they were saying, yeah, some of us agree with you. This is an intense debate. People on both sides feel very strongly. It's the part of the debate that you happen to like. It's the part of the debate where we don't just agree on the little stuff that we do in a bipartisan fashion. It's where we articulate our arguments. And I think it's worth noting, Chris, that never
Well, the
before,
part I like is the argument, but let me just try this by Here's something I don't like. Here's Glenn Beck. Here's Glenn Beck today on his radio show saying that the Speaker of the House and other Democratic leaders walked out of the Capitol on Sunday in a way aimed at encouraging people to kill them. To kill them. Here's Glenn Beck today on the radio saying this. You say the Democrats are inciting. Look at this. Listen to this.
I can guarantee you they walked out and said, what the hell do you have to do to these people to get them to kill us?
To get them to kill us.
No excuse
what do you
for
make
that
of
kind
Glenn
of rhetoric.
Beck?
There's no excuse for that kind of rhetoric. I told you I began my life as a prosecutor. That kind of rhetoric is not good for the nation, not good for the dialogue. But that does not mean that we ought to be focusing the people on the out of bounds, the over-the-top rhetoric. What we ought to be focusing on is where do we go from here? The reality is some of us believe this legislation won't solve the problem, and we want to go in and try to work on, okay, how do we fix the things that need to be fixed? And quite frankly, if the American people understand that this was not the final bill. Republican ideas on how to fix health care didn't disappear when this bill passed. Life goes on, reform goes on, and this is a country in which the people, including the minority, have remedies. They have the election, and they have all kinds of remedies other than violence. And we ought to be talking about the fact that they have remedies other than violence.
Okay, Eugene Robinson's with me for the Washington Post.
Yeah,
go ask Congressman.
Well, Congressman, I was there on Sunday, and the Republican members who came out on the balcony did whip up the crowd. And my question to you is, as a prosecutor,
of course they whipped up the crowd, but they weren't urging the crowd to violence. I mean, come on.
But
of course they whipped up the crowd.
Congressman, here's my question.
Well, wait. I walked across the street on the opposite side where the legislation people were chanting, and they were whipping up the crowd as well. That's a part of what happens in this kind of discourse in America. Just holding up the flag is not saying go throw a brick through a window or shoot through a window, for God's sake.
No, it's not. But here's my question. Let's assume that 99.9% of the people in that crowd or in the Tea Party movement are absolutely law-abiding, sensible people who make their policy argument and then go home. It's crazy people who do crazy things. And you look out there, when you use the specific rhetoric and the specific symbols that have been adopted by the crazy wing, by the people who are sitting at home waiting for the black helicopters to swoop down and confiscate their weapons, you are giving those people permission to have that fantasy and to act out that fantasy.
Okay, what do you make of Neugebauer's comment, baby killer? What do you make of Joe Wilson's comment, you lie? Both delivered on the floor of the House. What do you make of them?
I think both are inappropriate. I think both are out of line. And I think the exploitation of those comments by both sides since then is inappropriate. Look, you know as well as I do that there are people out there fundraising right now on the violence that's already occurred. People on the left using that for a fundraising device. People on the right using it for a fundraising device. My point is we should condemn that. And you and I, as people talking to that audience of American people, which may include some crazies, ought to be reminding them that that is not what this society is about. That in point of fact, they have the ballot, they have the right to peaceably assemble, and they have the right to get involved in the process. And I don't think that because they choose to wave a particular flag, that means that people who share their views shouldn't wave that flag because there's some nutcase in the audience. I can't control what nutcases are in the audience on the right, and the left can't control what nutcases are in the audience on the left.
Let's hope you're right.
Okay.
Let's hope you're right. But just remember, you and I have grown up in this country. We knew that a very terrible incident in this country occurred a couple of days after our UN ambassador, Adlai Stevenson, was spat upon in Texas. These things sometimes escalate from words to actions, and where the passions create a kind of a zeitgeist, where a left-winger kills our president in a right-wing atmosphere. I mean, you never know what nut's going to come out of the closet when the atmosphere reaches a certain pressure point. It does happen. I hope it doesn't happen this time. Of course we hope it doesn't.
The atmosphere is bad. I couldn't agree more that the atmosphere is bad, but I think what we ought to be doing as public officials, and you as a communicator and commentator ought to be saying, look, there's no place for this on the left or the right, not whipping it up on the left or whipping up on the right, and pointing out that this is a great nation because we don't have to turn to violence. We have the right to petition to our government on a peaceful means, and we have the right to and the obligation to engage in dialogue and to talk about how we fix the system.
Yeah, maybe the right wing should take this one in the chin the way the liberals did when Bush did his tax cut back in the early part of this century. They just took it in the chin. No rallies, no violence, no stone throwing, no bullets, nothing. They said, okay, Bush won, we lost.
You don't know that this is all right wing. I mean, come on. You know that it's not necessarily all right wing.
I don't think a right winger shot a bullet through the headquarters of Eric Cantor's office down in Richmond. I do agree. I said myself.
And actually,
the violence can be coming because of the zeitgeist, the atmospherics that can splatter all over the place.
Maybe it's the prosecutor in me, but I don't think you know where any of this violence came from.
As Bill Clinton would say,
until you do an investigation and find out who committed what acts of violence, nobody knows.
Okay, as Bill Clinton would say, in a different circumstance, nice tie.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll explain later. Thank you very much. U.S. Congressman John Shadegg of Arizona. Thank you, Gene Robinson from the Washington Post.